Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. Really happy to have you with us here today. This is episode 17 of the season, and we've got SpendHQ on the show. Very excited for the topic today. So we're going to be talking about governance models and change management strategies for spend analytics projects, tool solutions. So when you're putting up a SpendHQ, right, what should you be thinking about when it comes to governing the project, governing the tool, and also managing the change and making sure people adopt the solution. But before we get into it, before I get our invite, or I should say our guest on the platform here, let's just do our regular housekeeping here. So as I mentioned, SpendHQ on the show this week. Last week we had Graphite and we talked about SRM and deployment strategies. And as you can see, there's a whole backlog of shows that we have been doing since September. So if you haven't tuned in before and you want to see the replays, you can go to our YouTube channel listed at the top of the screen here to see all of the replays. And then we've got some very interesting episodes coming up in the next couple of weeks here around governance models, change management, and different types of solutions that you have in the procure tech space. And everything culminates on April 22nd to 24th, where we're going to have our first edition of Procure Tech Unpacked, which is a 100% virtual conference, no travel. You can tune in from where you're sitting right now for 3 half days. And we're going essentially to have peer-led breakout sessions, vendor solution demos from the folks that you've seen on the show this season, workshops, keynotes, and you're going to be voting for who wins the Procure Tech Cup this year. So we're really excited. I'm partnering with Connect House to put that on. And so get your phone out if you'd like to attend, because I have a QR code for you, right? So you can scan the QR code, fill out the quick survey around, who you are, what you want to learn. And I want to make sure that I'm creating breakout groups that are industry specific. So we've got a pharma group getting together, a manufacturing group. What's the other one? I had a third one, banking and financial services, that I know we're standing up, and we could stand up a couple other ones as well, depending on who signs up. And we're keeping everything intimate and so that it can be impactful. And I have 2 objectives. One, to make you a new best friend in your industry that's also going through procure tech and procurement transformations. So that's objective number 1. And then number 2 is getting you an overview of the art of the possible with procure tech in those 3 mornings Eastern time. So first come, first serve. Scan the code if you're interested, and I will get back to you with the details. All right, housekeeping behind us. What's the agenda for today? So we're going to talk briefly, just level set on what is a spend analytics solution, and make sure we're all speaking the same language here. And then we'll go straight into the discussion with my guest around change management, governance models for spend analytics. So we've separated it into 3 parts. Number 1, what do you want to do pre-go live, right? So you're implementing a tool for the first time. Go live is when you switch, you turn it on, people start using it. What should you be thinking about in terms of governance models? Same thing, but after go live, so after your project is done and when the real work starts, and we'll get into why that is, what should you be thinking about in terms of governance? And then also, as you're through that whole process, right, either pre or post go live, what are the change management and adoption tips that you should have in mind? So let's start by bringing on our guest here today, Shannon Wegner, Strategic Account Manager at SpendHQ. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, and I think you're based out of Wisconsin, right?
I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yes, I am. We're experiencing our first fake spring right now, so hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer.
Yeah, I feel like being from Montreal, we've lived through similar realities this year. It's been a pretty intense one compared to the slush we've had the last couple of years, right?
It's great. Gotta love it.
All right, cool. Well, thanks so much for being here, Shannon. So we'll dive straight into it, given we want to get to the top, to the half hour here. So first off, as I mentioned, let's start with just defining terms, right? Mm-hmm. So I put up this procure tech market map every week just to help situate people. And today we're really in that top left-hand corner, right, of spend analysis. So it's really, I always term it as like, it's the huge credit card statement that the whole business buys, right? And so you're trying to look at, what did we buy? Did we get fake charges on there? How can we split this into categories? How can we then feed into category management and have a plan and have opportunities to optimize how we spend our dollars and have a better value for our dollar in the business. Is that how you guys think of it at SpendHQ as well?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think with spend analytics, I always think of it as kind of my foundation. It's my first step. It's having that visibility to where am I spending my money? Who are my suppliers? How am I managing that spend? Am I managing that spend? It's step number one, finding that visibility, finding those buckets, giving it a categorization, and making sure that we're all speaking the same language. So I always look at it as foundation, step one.
And it sounds pretty simple, but like when you get in these complex environments where there's multiple ERPs, multiple systems, multiple countries, it can get quite dicey quite quickly, right?
Yeah, I would say that accessing the data tends to be the most complicated step. So you think, oh, I'll just pull, a file, send it over, we'll categorize it, we'll normalize it, we'll get it into the tool. But when you look at, multi-billion-dollar organizations, they could have 10 different data sources, 10 different ERPs, a Concur, a travel system, legacy systems where they don't even know what the different attributes in that system are. So it could take some delicate resources and some time to actually get into that data and translate it to make sure you know what is what and make sure it all feeds together appropriately. So it can be an effort.
And that's, I think, a great segue into just getting an overview of what it is you guys do at SpendHQ. And I know you guys were on the show earlier on this year as well. So if people want to learn more around SpendHQ in the first show, we spent a bit more time on it, and we can also get a demo of SpendHQ if you'd like one. But otherwise, like I'd love just your kind of one pager on who SpendHQ is and how people should think about you in that space.
Yeah, I'll give you the 30,000-foot view of SpendHQ. We really give kind of the full procurement life cycle for spend and savings management. So if you look here, there's kind of 8 steps to what we do. The first step being that spend analytics, spend intelligence view. So it's that data consolidation. So pulling the data, accessing the data, cleansing, categorizing it, which gives customers that opportunity to find savings, find projects, find cost out, whatever that might be, which then leads into our second solution, which is performance management, which is a tool that helps you track, manage, and find that visibility again to those programs that you're running to take those savings out of your procurement organization, which then leads to your savings and your value. So it's leading all the way from visibility to savings and value. And SpendHQ can help you all the way through from that start to that finish.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm looking at it like through the lens of a viewer where I know many organizations have tried to do this like in Power BI, right? Or like manually themselves to stand this stuff up. What would you say is like the biggest, why should they be looking at something like a SpendHQ instead of trying to stand it up themselves?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that our biggest competition is in-house solutions. On the spend intelligence side, Power BI, data warehouses from long ago, those are areas where people might manage their spend. They're not going to get the classification clarity that a SpendHQ can provide to that level of detail, right? So we're going to be able to process massive amounts of data very quickly to get that clear level of multi-level classification for management of the data. So you can find those opportunities so that you can figure out how many areas you have too many suppliers or desperate payment terms, things like along those lines. On the performance management side, there really isn't a tool in the market that compares, I would say. Most of my customers are using Excel. They have some sort of internal tracker they developed to track or identify the projects they might be leading. At 15 plus years in procurement myself, all of my savings programs were in Excel on some sort of level internally. It works. It's not always consistent across departments. It's not consistent upon reporting. And you can't give those approvals or tracking or report outs the same way you would in a performance management tool. And it just gives you that more professional, defined ability to track, view, and maintain your programs. So it really just takes you to a more professional visibility level more than anything.
Yeah. And I see the risk aspect of it as well, right?
Oh, huge.
I've seen some of these Excels and they become like monsters. And as soon as something breaks or the key person that developed it
100%.
no longer
they
with
leave the company, or there's embedded things in the Excel, something happens, and then it's gone. So definitely.
Oh, and I'm wondering, I think Shannon may have, we lost you for a second there, Shannon. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Cool. No, all good. So I think that gives us a good view, a good overview of SpendHQ, and I appreciate you helping us helping understand the differences with what I've seen in a lot of organizations. Which also leads into why we asked you to have this conversation, the second part, right, around change management and governance models for spend analytics tools, right? So I'd love to get your view on how you think about it, and then we can go into these different ways that we've sliced up the topic.
Yeah, most definitely. So in looking at implementing new customers, this is something very, very near and dear to my heart, because once you've achieved that sales cycle, they've decided to work with you, move forward with you. This is kind of their first experience as to what's going to happen when they're a customer long-term. So that pre-go live is critical. So like, what are we doing together? How are we going to make this happen? What is our plan? So really something you need to focus on is that structure. What are we doing together? What is our cadence? How are we making this happen? The second phase of that is your post-go live. So now we're up and we're rolling. This is the first time that they are on their own, the customer's on their own in the tool, and they're leveraging that. So making sure that they find that value and that they are able to use the tool, that they're able to find that leverage and to find those savings and to move forward. And then along the way, what are you able to do to change and adapt to make sure that they are able to move forward, they're able to adopt, they're able to use the tool internally. So it's kind of that before, right away, and then across the board that you're looking at once you're supporting a customer.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I think it's a great way of framing it, right?
Yeah.
As I'm looking in the chat here, we got folks from across the world here.
Yeah.
I want to encourage you to ask questions as we go through it as well, so I can see your questions. I can ask them to Shannon, or maybe attempt them to answer myself. That's more appropriate. But as we go here, I wanted to remind you that that's a possibility. So you just type it in LinkedIn and we'll get it here on the show. So yeah, tell me, Shannon, like so pre-go live, right? Yeah. We've signed that contract with a spend analytics provider. What should we be thinking about in terms of mobilizing the team and setting up the project structure?
Yeah, very critical portion right now. You're getting to know each other. The teams are starting to work together. They're starting to figure out how they're going to make this happen. So a lot of times in this phase of the project, you might be transitioning from the primary stakeholder or the buyer of the solution to that implementation team within the customer. So it's really, really critical that you're going to define what are those goals, what are those KPIs, making sure that everybody's on the same page and you're speaking the same language. So when somebody defines a time frame or a term, are we on the same page? Is that the same scope? Is that the same metric? Setting timeframes, defining a small start or a large start. So typically, is there a set group that you want to roll out with to start? Maybe start with a 3-month set of data rather than the 3 years of data, so that you can look at that, determine, do we have the data elements we need to move forward with, rather than looking at a very large set of data and processing that and realizing that something may or may not be missing. But it all really comes down to that communication. So asking the questions right away, making sure the questions are asked to the right team members, that questions don't get lost in the mix, that a question doesn't get proposed and lost for an extended period of time. So you're not missing those deadlines, so that everyone is on the same page and feels that they're being included and heard along the way. Something I always talk about at this point is making sure you have the right team members involved. So you're not playing that game of telephone. So if there's technology questions or data questions on the solution side or on the customer side, that you have that data person talking to that data person, or if someone's responsible for the API connector, that those two team members on both sides are having that conversation, because things can often get lost in translation. Again, going back to communication, but it's easier for those like-to-like partners to have that conversation rather than someone translating that across the board. And again, having those conversations sooner rather than later.
And what's your perspective, Shannon, on like, because in your two in a box, right? Which is what I'm understanding. Like you'll have somebody on the SpendHQ side, and then you should have somebody on the client side that has kind of the same role, right? Two in a box. What's your thought on like when I'm initially standing up a SpendCube with a solution like this, like involving finance, which might not be, you might not think of it, right? It might be just like a procurement tool, a procurement initiative. So yeah, I'd love your thoughts on that, right? Like what are the advantages or things to think about like going at it alone as procurement and having IT support to connect the data sources, and or having a wider stakeholder group? I mentioned finance, but maybe others come to mind, like sustainability or whoever else. Oh, I think we lost you, Shannon, again.
10, 15, 20 stakeholders, and it gets very muddy very fast because everyone has an opinion and everyone wants to own something and everyone needs to have, a foot in the game. I think that makes it more complicated personally. You do need to make sure you have the right people in the room. But if finance isn't investing in the tool and they're not a key user of the tool, they probably don't need to be in the day-to-day meetings. I typically would look to involve those teams or users or auxiliary team members once you're up and live in a more involved after go live discussion as to how they can leverage the tool based on their needs. Obviously, if finance is paying for the tool and they're very keyed in on defining the initial KPIs, you would need to involve them in the meetings. But the more people you have in the meetings, the more complicated it can get.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I think that's a good rule of thumb, right? And the context is super important, right? As you kind of allude to in your answer there. So I think for me, it's also, we had SRM on last week. We were talking about governance models there as well. And I feel like it's similar, right? A supplier master can be as narrow or as wide as we want it to be. Like I can have sustainability information, compliance information, et cetera, right? And same thing with spend data, right? I can get into OTIF, I can get into sustainability, I can get into all these other dimensions like savings tracking, and especially when you get in that second half of your
PM side,
management, right? So depending on the scope, I think it's right. Like keeping the team as small as possible, and I always talk about the minimum viable project and the minimum viable scope.
Yes.
So like how can you stand this thing up, get some experience, right? Get some with the tool and with the process of importing data, enriching it, normalizing it, like seeing it with a small group, and then growing the.
I completely agree. I always tell my customers, let's start here. We can always add more later. So they kind of see this. Oh, wait. At SpendHQ, we talk about, there's all these partners that we can partner with, and there's all these enrichment files that we can bring in. But I like to start with the core. Like, let's get you visibility to your data. Let's get you the classification and the normalization and get you started, because you don't even have that yet. Like, let's run before we can, let's walk before we can run. And then we can bring in the diversity data. And then we can bring in, because if you get too much, you miss the ability to even see where your original opportunities stand. So,
And I think we'll probably end up circling back to during project, right? But I'd love to skip over to post go live, because I think
most definitely
what we're alluding to is like this becomes a cycle in some ways,
most definitely. Right? So at post go live, I do think it is very important that you revisit those pre-go live goals that you established, because typically at this point in time, you're going to transition from an implementation team to some sort of a customer value team or an account management team. And you want to make sure that everyone understands this was what we were aiming to achieve during implementation, and this is where we are at the go live transition into a new phase of the project. So you need to make sure that you have those clear owners, you have those clear goals. This is what we accomplished or what was changed. This is where the scope of work stands, so that everyone's clear and on the same page moving forward. And then setting your cadence. So are we going to meet? How often are we going to talk? Or is it annual business reviews, quarterly business reviews? Is it a high maintenance relationship, or is it a low maintenance relationship? Do they want visibility to usage? Are they up and running and they're good to go? Again, going back to that communication standpoint, the last thing you want to run into is a renewal and have a customer come back and say, hey, I haven't heard from you in 2 years, and you thought that they were good to go. And then for me, it's always at value, right? So they've looked to you to help provide value to their procurement organization. So are they using the tool? Are they optimizing the tool? And what does that mean to them? So does that mean logins? Does that mean projects? Does that mean savings? And how can you help them continue to find that? So is that through bringing back new product, the product roadmap, new solutions, partner ideas, and so on and so forth, so that as you have that ongoing cadence going forward and continued support, they're all on that same page moving forward. So you're no longer looking at how are we getting it live and how are we going to make sure you get what you wanted, but how do we continue to support that going forward?
And just, I saw we have a question in the chat. So I've got a question for you, but I'll ask a question from the chat. And it's more around like, if we go back to the usage, right? I'm not even going to attempt to say your name just because I'm afraid to say it wrong. But he was saying we're using D365 for direct materials. For indirect materials and services, we're using Axe, which I'm not familiar with. We could get live spend reports from D365, but we're wondering how it will be effective for indirect materials and services where they're less SKU controlled, right? And so I don't know if you run into this type of a setup where direct and indirect are different in different systems, and how you think about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it comes down, it's hard for me to answer without having some visibility to the data. So in this question, it looks like there's not SKU level information at that point. So it becomes harder to classify when we're not at the SKU level. So you would probably be able to get classification, but not that same SKU level visibility that we like to provide for classification, cost savings opportunities, and granularity. Hard to say without seeing a sample.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the better the data that you have, the better the result of normalization, enrichment, et cetera, right? But it doesn't mean that you don't get value from a lower quality or a lower granularity data.
So like, for example, we work with a lot of PEs and holding companies. So they might be pulling data from tens of hundreds of companies, and it might not be granular level data, but they're at least seeing that consolidation of data from purchasing at the supplier level, where they can go back and negotiate higher level agreements, which is incredibly valuable to those organizations. Whereas a standard retail company, that wouldn't be valuable at all because they need that granular level so that they can negotiate to that point. So it just depends on the type of the organization.
And to bring it back to what where we're at with the post go live, like to me, it's like you're turning on the lights on your data with this type of tool, and then you'll see, right? Oh, for indirect in this geography, like we're not even using catalogs, like we don't have any SKUs, right? It's just descriptions, free text, and so it also serves not only as a spend indicator, but also a
data quality indicator. Correct. Right? And that's one of the first things that we do in that pre-go live. Even before pre-go live, in that data assessment. So right at the beginning of the implementation, we'll assess the data and say, hey, just so you know, only 10% of your data has payment terms information. This is a huge opportunity for your team to go back and collect this. There's not a lot that I can do to get that data for you. Maybe I can find a partner that can help with that, but it's a gap in your data that could really help you negotiate savings down the road if you had this visibility. So, which people might not even know.
Which ties it back to, I think as people are thinking of budgeting for these types of things, right? Post go live, there's still, like I always say, that the project starts at go live, right? In the sense
especially in a spend intelligence program. I mean, that's 100%.
And so you're gonna turn the lights on the data. You're gonna start going through it, and that might lead to improvement initiatives in your back-end ERP systems or process changes, channel changes.
Creation of a data lake. I mean, there's all kinds of things that customers come out of it with. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And so if we shift gears here to this last segment.
Final.
Adoption. Yeah. So as through that whole process, right? Whether it be pre or post adoption, like I'd love to get your take on how you think about the specificities of change management and adoption for spend analytics.
Yeah. This is my favorite. This is how do I keep the customers interested going forward, right? So they're implemented, they're live, they've been on the program for a while. You have to keep them engaged. You have to keep them excited. So it's what interests them, what is keeping them going within the tool. So it's making training dynamic. So what's important to that customer? Is it web trainings? Is it lunch and learns? Is it office hours? And it's also encouraging them to use the tool. So something I constantly tell my customers is you're not going to break it. So whether you're new or whether you've been in the tool forever, just go in there and play with it. Like any tool that you have, just use the tool. My team's here to support you and make that functional for you and provide value. So go out and play with the tool. It is not going to explode. And then know that they have someone to come back to if they need that support. So not only are they paying for the solution, but they're paying for the team behind the solution to help support them going forward. So those are the biggest things for me, I think. Very, very commonsensical, but very important.
And what's your perspective on like what I call managing through the tool, right? Especially in that second piece, performance management. Like I find that's a game changer where, I've been in some situations where like, leadership says they want to implement a tool. We get budget for a tool. We implement a tool. But then they never manage through the tool.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, and I think each tool is different. So in like a performance management tool, you have to give them the right tips to how to leverage the tool. So a spend intelligence tool, it should be their go-to every day. They go and they log in and they look into it and they see where's my spend, what's out of whack. They have the reports. It's visibility to your data. Whereas a performance management tool almost needs to come from I hate the word compliance, but the support of the organization in leveraging that tool. So I think of it as the team, everyone is looking at that tool for what do we have in the pipeline? Who's moving the pipeline? Where is it going? Are we pushing things through the pipeline? So, and not just leadership watching, but also people sharing. So what are my team members doing and how are they moving things? So having team meetings, how are your things going? What's working? What is it? So more of that accountability with what's in the tool and how you're leveraging it. So from managing and then also from peers.
I love it. And then that's where I'll also, to our earlier discussion on pre-go live, scoping out the tool is where you can start bringing other folks into the spend analysis universe, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah. And then a big thing for me is also connecting the networking of current users of a solution, right? So I might not be the best answer or advocate, but I know someone else in a like industry that's using the tool and has a great example. So introducing those people, those current users to customers to share, right? Because I think that's a great way to learn together too.
Yeah, and it's such an underrated way to get value from a SaaS tool, right? Of like making sure that you're leveraging the software vendor's existing client base, either for like community data type things, but also access to other like-minded
just tips and tricks, right? Like we just had our insights event and I look over and I have like a medical device manufacturer talking to a software manufacturer and they're sharing insights. And I'm like, I never really thought to put them together, but they're 100% sharing how they leverage the tools. I mean, it's fabulous.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. And so, if we do a little recap here, it's thinking about, pre-go live, what is the scope? What are the objectives and how does that turn into what I call like the minimum viable scope, right? Like that you can align on and deliver on with the smallest team possible, get that thing to production as fast as possible. And then you can always circle back, but you also need to plan your budgeting and your team that way, right? In the sense where when it's live, the project's not over. Every system is a child that needs a parent, so to speak.
Yes.
And so
I feel like I'm the parent. Am I the parent? Is that my job?
I think you're like the godmother.
The godmother. I'll take that. Yeah. I'll take that.
and leveraging the supplier or your software vendor for all of these things that Shannon you mentioned, I thought were pretty insightful. And then from a change standpoint, making sure that it's a continuous process, right? You're not just implementing a tool once because you're trying to circle back and make better use of it as you deepen your understanding, and you're also kind of going to P2P, addressing certain data issues, coming back, getting higher quality data, and getting more mature as an organization as a result of having the lights turned on your car, so to speak. Anything to add? Anything you want to leave the audience with on this note, Shannon?
No, I would just say make sure that you're choosing true partners, people that are listening and hearing you and working with you going forward, because that's going to lead to a successful partnership.
I love it. I find that's a great way to end this topic. Yeah. And so if you're watching the show online, thanks so much for tuning in live today. If you want to get in touch with me, I run the Peer Procurement newsletter every week. We share articles, jobs, must-read links on what's going on in the industry. We always have a perspective on how to get better value from your ProcureTech investments. And Shannon, I know you guys at SpendHQ also prepared a little something, right?
Yeah, just a quick link here. The key to everything is data and that classification. So making sure you have the right data and the right grouping with the right visibility. So just a quick link here if you want to learn more about that, and feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and that's such a good point you made, right? We could have probably done a whole episode on it, but like the spend taxonomy, like don't just use a standard one like you in SPSC. You got to make it your own. But that's neither here nor there.
Another day.
All right, so everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Shannon, for taking some time out of your day on this Friday to come chat with us, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks everybody.
So much.